Okay, welcome and good afternoon. We are here to conduct listening session, also known as some candidate questions for our first candidate for county administrator for the unified government. My name's Melissa Bynum. I serve as at-large District 1 Commissioner for the unified government, and in this role, I am acting as Mayor Pro Tem to conduct the questions that have been submitted by the commissioners. At this time, I'm going to introduce Chief Counsel Misty Brown just to make a brief statement, and then we'll get underway.
Misty Brown, Chief Counsel. So as Commissioner Bynum has mentioned, the questions were prepared by the commissioners and ranked, and the plan is that she will go through each question with each candidate so everyone receives the same question. If there is, I don't foresee this happening, but if there was discussion that veered off where I thought that we might be treading into some dangerous ground, asking inappropriate questions, regarding age, disability, family status, or something to that effect, I'll raise my hand. I don't foresee it, but I'll just let you know if you see my hand come up, that's why I'm doing it.
Thank you. I want to introduce also, we have Daryl Wynn here. Many of you know him. Daryl was active and participated with the search team. And then we have Ryan Cotton with GovHR, the consultant that helped us through this process and got us to today. So thank you both very much for being here. And we appreciate all the time you've given to the process to date. So we're going to go ahead and get started. We have our first candidate here. This is Mr. John Curp. Welcome. We are so very pleased to have you here and be able to spend this time with you. We have compiled a series of questions, and in order to get through all of them with each of the candidates, it's going to be about a 3 to 4 minute time frame available to you for answering. Behind you slightly is our clerk, Monica Sparks, and she's actually got a timer, so you may hear a voice tell you either that you have a minute or that your time is up. It's not a hard and fast rule. It's just so that we can keep moving and get through the questions. Okay, so we're not going to cut you off, but we want you to be aware of the time. And then my first question for you is, are you somewhat familiar with the geography of our county and therefore our various commission districts? Have you been able to look at that?
Yes, and first, thank you all for having me to Kansas City. It's my second trip here.
Excellent.
I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak with all of you. When I was here last week, I did take the opportunity. I did rent a car and spend a day driving around the entire county.
Thank you. What I would like to do, and thank you for that answer, is start down here at the end, and we'll introduce ourselves to you with our name and our district.
This is Mike King, District 5, district where you would have stopped.
Good afternoon, Mr. Curp. My name is Gail Townsend. I'm Commissioner in District for District 1, Northeast M, Kansas City.
Chuck Stites, County Commissioner, District 7. Nice to meet you.
Andrew Davis, 8th District Commissioner, Midtown, North Central KCK, District 8.
Angela Markley, District 6, which is almost all of Turner and about half of Argentine.
And I am Melissa Bynum, at large District 1, which is basically the northern half of the county.
Tom Burrows, at-large Commissioner, District Number 2, the southern part of Wyandotte County.
Good afternoon. I'm Brian McKiernan. I represent District 2, which is the downtown and neighborhoods just to the west and the south.
Thank you. We may have Commissioner Harold Johnston able to join us at some point. District 4, not present right at the moment, but we may see him before your time here is done. So we're going to get right into this. First question for you is, what experience have you had, if any, in overseeing a budget that had a structural deficit? So I'm going to go ahead and combine in question 2 and 3, because the next question is, if you've had experience with a budget with a structural deficit, what actions were taken? And third, were those efforts successful? So if you, and certainly because that's 3 questions, you know, you can take 4 or 5 minutes answering that. Go right ahead.
And thank you. I think all governments are facing this question right now and coming out of COVID, and it's not unusual. The city of Cincinnati, I was the interim city manager for 9 months. Our budget's $1.6 billion. It is structurally imbalanced, meaning that we were relying on ARPA money to subsidize a structural deficit. What was important in my leadership in the transition of that government from the prior administration to the current one was building this first budget and focusing on how we can get towards structural balance. And be very clear, City of Cincinnati relies on income tax, which is something you don't have to rely on as much here, given it's a sales tax and property tax. But the lines in Cincinnati aren't going to meet. The growth in income, workforce moving out of the city or staying working from home has created a huge structural deficit. What I did in this first budget was a long-term plan to bring us to structural balance by the time that the ARPA funds had expired. Those funds have to be spent 2 years. How can we get those lines as closely together as we could? We were creative in trying to increase reserves, probably as much as possible. And we looked for innovative ways to generate revenue. All the expenditures that we did on projects, my direction was they have to be forward-looking in the sense of building value to the point where every investment is going to create something that will grow our tax base and generate more revenue for the city. Now, I won't be there to see that happen, at least in the role that I had. But I'm confident based on what we're seeing in growth in income in the community, the savings that we've made, and how we're looking to grow revenue based on those early ARPA investments. It looks like we will close the structural balance to about $19 to $20 million, which in a $1.6 billion budget is certainly something we think we could achieve in 2 to 3 years.
Thank you. Next question. Considering your past work experiences with other municipalities in the topic areas of economic development, what, if any, failures have you had in trying to improve areas in any municipality that had economic challenges or were depressed?
Sure. I was recruited to be the city solicitor in Cincinnati because of my background in real estate and economic development and private practice. I worked in Cincinnati for 6 years as a city solicitor. And my leadership role, apart from directing the city law department, was to help lead the city's economic development team and bring a level of sophistication that only existed in private practice in our community. So there's many successes in Cincinnati that I can point to. If any of you have been to the city, I'd love to give you a virtual tour of what we had done there back from 2008, 2014 that laid the groundwork for what the community looks like now and the prosperity and growth that we have achieved. The question is, what are the failures? I like not to think of, gosh, how did I fail in the course of that time that I was there? But I certainly think the criticism that was most common was that we were focused on the big projects. We were focused on how to make downtown bright and lively and attract people from outside the community and make it kind of a playground for the region to come and tourists to come. And I think we're successful in that. But we also, I think, the criticism was that we may neglected some of the neighborhood business districts. And I think if you look at what I was working on when I left the city, it was the focus on creating vibrancy within the neighborhood business districts. Cincinnati is a city of 52 distinct neighborhoods, any combination of which represent the demographics and communities in Wyandotte County. And I think if you look, what we did was we empowered the neighborhood business communities, the small business owners, the neighborhoods, local community development corporations, local neighborhood groups to find out what they want to see within their business district, in their community. And I think if you look at how we built that dynamic, Again, we empowered every local community to tell us, what do you want to see in growth and development in your neighborhood? And we used that to build and invest and get them on the way. Now, one of the things I did require and put in progress was we have multiple neighborhood community development corporations that do the work in their community. They were all in the process of revising their strategic plan. Here we are, we have a limited amount of money to spend in the next couple of years. What are the short-term and long-term objectives that you have in your neighborhood? And where they didn't have the skill themselves to do it, we used our city development team, our community development team to come in and assist them and help them build that plan. And once we have a plan, then we have something to work towards, we can manage for. We can recruit, we can supplement, we can measure, get feedback, and respond. So I think it's that element of listening, understanding what each neighborhood business districts want, and building towards that.
Just a tiny segue on that. What, if anything, might you do different if confronted with a similar situation here?
I think the most important part of this job is listening. And I don't say I think I did listen in the work that I did in Cincinnati. And I think if you talk to community and business leaders there, I met with a lot of people. I sat down in churches and neighborhood community councils and schools and Cub Scout meetings and women's groups and business groups. And what's important is listening and finding out what every community wants to see there. And I think that's where we start here. I know there's a strategic planning process in place. Do we need to revisit that? Where are we in that process? Where do we step in? Where do we make it fit what every neighborhood and community wants? Because this is an extremely diverse community. From the far west where you have open green fields and spaces for brand new development to the urban east where you don't have lots of places to just tear down and build new. You've got to work within each, and it requires a unique plan for each place.
Thank you. Change gears just a tiny bit. Our staff here have experienced a great deal of upheaval over the last year, including significant turnover of department heads and lower level employees. How would you ensure that employees feel supported and valued, given additional tasks, possibly without additional pay, due to so many open positions?
And I've lived and worked in that environment. I was brought to the city of Cincinnati to honestly reinvigorate a law department that was failing in the eyes of the courts and the community, and bring outside leadership and restore the integrity of the city law department. And I did that first by letting everyone know that we were a team, that I wanted to create a culture of collaboration and innovation, and I expected us to be the leaders in what we were doing. It wasn't my job to make all the decisions for everyone in the department. It was my job to empower them to be the professionals that they had trained to be, and to use their passion for government to accomplish their career objectives. And that was to build a team, build an environment where people wanted to come to work, they felt empowered to do their jobs. I did the same when I came back to the city of Cincinnati. It had just gone through probably one of the worst 4 to 6 years of corruption that the city had known. I was brought back in from outside city government to kind of help restore the credibility, restore the morale of city workers and government. Our department directors hadn't met in over 2 to 3 years, partly because of COVID, but partly because I don't think that they shared the camaraderie. In my very first week there, we had everyone sitting in a room, much like this, saying, I trust you. You are the experts in what you do. You are empowered to lead and build the community that we all want to share. I expect collaboration and innovation and to be accountable for the work that you do.
Thank you, sir. As you did your research for this particular job, what struck you as the 1 or 2 biggest challenges facing our unified government? And what struck you as 1 or 2 biggest opportunities available to our unified government?
Well, I think the opportunities are clear. This community has tremendous resources in this region. And I think the ability to manage, to promote, to develop and attract the region to enjoy those resources, to grow them, and bring those benefits here and keep them in the community for the benefit of the people who live and work here. Again, one of my initiatives when I was the city manager that I put in place was what I call the three elements of local investment, local contracting, local employment. How do we focus our resources in growing the investor class so that we use our local wealth and grow it and keep it here so it's not leaving this community? How do we grow our business community through contracts and contracting? How do we get those monies here? How do we keep them here and grow businesses in this part of the community? And then how do we employ our local people? One of the challenges we have in Cincinnati and many communities was you go to a job site on a major government project and you see license plates from all over the Midwest. That's not what local government growth and economic justice is about. It's about how do we use our local resources to grow and build here locally for the benefit of our community. What's the other part of that question, if you could remind me, was
Challenges.
challenges. And I think that is a challenge. I also think there's a challenge on, quite honestly, I've, not to be too presumptuous, I've looked at real estate, I've looked at housing, I've looked at schools. How do we put all that together to grow and build this community? I can tell, I'm looking across 47th Street, looking at that line on both sides. The difference in property values across that line is remarkable. How did we get there? Where do we go from there? How do we build our community so that this is a place where everybody wants to live and work, so that no one feels that there should be in my view, a red line down the street.
Thank you, sir, for that. During your past work experiences in the topic areas of economic development, what, if any, successes have you had with improving areas of a municipality that were economically challenged or depressed before your intervention? Do you have an example of that you could share with us?
Many from my work in Cincinnati. I can name a few projects. Probably the one closest to scale is an area we called Washington Park in Cincinnati. It was at the intersection of one of the highest crime places in the country. It was a place where we partnered with our local community development corporation, with the neighborhoods, with our parks board, to build a park that has become a meeting place, a community gathering space, as defined by what the neighborhoods wanted to see and feel, and has become one of the most popular destinations within the Cincinnati region. It used an existing housing stock that was built in the mid 1800s that was poor, had worn down. Buildings were owned by out-of-town landlords that didn't maintain the properties, created horrendous living conditions for the people who lived there. We worked block by block. We built the park, major investment in the park, to build that sense of space. Our local community development corporation, our housing advocates, built to create an economically and socially diverse community where we have a whole range and spectrum of income levels, where people play in the park together. The park is regularly programmed. It's tremendous success for our community and our region. And it's something that we are able to duplicate in many other neighborhoods in our city. And I think that's a good example of something I was involved in.
Can you name it again?
Washington Park.
Thank you. And we'll take another little turn. Two-part question. Tell us about your experience negotiating labor contracts with public workers. And secondarily, are you able to leave perhaps Chief Counsel with a contact name and number of a labor leader that you were successful in negotiating with?
Yeah, as the, as the city solicitor, led collective bargaining for the city for 6 years, working with all our public sector unions, building trades. And as city manager, I was in contact on a regular basis with all of our union leadership on a regular basis. So it's something I'm comfortable with and have worked with extensively. And I think all of those many union presidents that I work with in their locals in the city, I have excellent relationships with all of them.
How many local unions would you say you dealt with in your time in Cincinnati?
Sure. I think the city of Cincinnati probably has, firefighters and FOP, our public services workers are represented. Multiple departments have different local presidents. So there's probably 8 to 10 of those minimum. And then building trades are very small representation within the city, but we do have carpenters and bricklayers and other represented groups. So
Okay, excellent.
we have nurses and public health officials. So again, every local.
Quite a range.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. This is your last question. And then we have plenty of time here. So after this last question, maybe you could take 5 minutes and just tell us a little bit about yourself. I didn't do that at the front end because I was concerned about our time. So we'll ask our last question and then give you just 5 minutes for introductory comments.
Great.
Tell us about a time when there was conflict in your organization between individuals, between departments, whatever conflict you conjure in your mind. Describe strategies you used to resolve conflict and create a positive outcome for those involved.
Sure. I think everyone that's worked with me and for me knows that I'm no drama. I believe that there are issues that we need to bring them up, put them out, get the people that are affected by the interpersonal conflicts and work through it, in a way that's professional and discreet. And where necessary, if there's inappropriate conduct and action, they need to be dealt with swiftly and openly. We work in government. We are accountable for our leadership and how we handle those types of issues. But that's frankly, as a department leader, as the city's chief lawyer, you get to handle the conflicts and relationships across all the departments. And as the city manager, I was, kind of the person of last resort on countless numbers of issues, some very serious and some not so serious. So it's, again, a situation where I'm comfortable with dealing with, and I believe in being, again, direct and transparent in how I view situations and how they should be dealt with.
Thank you very much. Those are the top 10 questions that were provided by ranking, submitted by our commissioners, and then ranked by our commissioners. So those are the entirety of the questions. And Chief Counsel, I'm going to assume it would be okay now to just let you talk with us for 5 minutes about anything maybe that we didn't ask that you might want to make sure we know.
Sure.
As long as each candidate gets the same opportunity, Commissioner.
Very good. Thank you. So 3, 4, 5 minutes.
Sure.
I think we're going to have time for this for everybody based on how we made it through these questions.
Great.
Thanks.
Well, a little bit about me. I was born and raised in Dayton, Ohio. Went to Miami University in Oxford, Ohio. Studied business finance, mostly because my career goal when I was 18 years old was to be the city manager of Dayton, Ohio. Dayton, Ohio was one of the first big city manager governments in the country. My father was a local elected official, school board, and a mayor of a working class suburb of Dayton. And he told me he believed that the best preparation for work in government was business and finance. From there, I went to law school. Not so much to passion to be a lawyer and work in a courtroom, but for me, it was kind of a graduate degree in government, learning the essence of how laws affect and touch people. I had an opportunity out of law school to work for a major Midwestern law firm, Taft, Tinney and Hollister. Opportunity too good to pass up. Some of the best lawyers in the country. I was trained by them. I was trained in litigation. I was trained in business and real estate. Worked for 13 years, earned a partnership, and I lived in Columbus, Ohio, and worked in that area. I was recruited to be the city solicitor in Cincinnati by Milton Mahoney and Mayor Mark Mallory. Mayor Mark Mallory was the first directly elected Black mayor of Cincinnati. Worked in that administration for 6 years, and again laid the groundwork for, I think, what is most people describe as the Renaissance of Cincinnati over the last 15 to 20 years. Changing governments, found myself on looking for employment. I don't think it had anything to do with my performance. It was more of, again, a new mayor, new leadership. I went back to private practice and kind of filled the same role that I had done prior to coming to government, which was working on business and economic development transactions. I was the only former law director that was in the law firms in Cincinnati, so I was seen as a local expert on municipal law and working with the city. Opportunity came available to come and lead a new government, we had a new mayor, 8 new elected council members. They were looking someone with experience and working in our system in Cincinnati, and gladly answered the call to come to go work for them. My time in the city, I built and grew the most diverse legal institution in Cincinnati. I focused on how do we attract the best talent in our community that reflects our citizens, our neighborhood, and I hired based on what every attorney's passion was for their service. When I came to Cincinnati, I found that our attorneys were out of touch with the community that they served. Most of our attorneys worked out in the suburbs, drove into downtown, and didn't realize the people they were working for when they passed them on the highway. So one of the first things I did was work consciously to reconnect our lawyers with our community. And there were a few initiatives that I started. One was a very simple public speaking requirement. Every lawyer in our city, and at the time it was during the Great Recession, so we didn't have raises, so I had a negative incentive. It was worth $500 a year for you to go out and speak one time to a community group in our city. Didn't care who it was. Could have been a professional association, the bar, business community, Girl Scouts, church group, one time, because we had 80 employees in the city, but they weren't reaching our people. And I didn't want the first time the community met a city attorney to be at the courthouse when they were there for circumstances that weren't quite so pleasurable. And I think it worked. I think it connected our lawyers to the people that they were serving. So I think that's characteristic of how I view government. It should be people reaching out and working, knowing who they work with and bringing the passion for the community that they live in and the people that they serve. So that's who I am. When I was the city manager, I went and visited every, community councils were just starting back post-COVID, starting their community and neighborhood meetings. But I went to community councils that said, hey, look, this is the first time we've ever had a city manager come to our neighborhood and talk to us. And that's, again, who I am. How do we get out? How do we find out firsthand what the needs of the people are and how we can best serve them? So that's kind of how I view government and our role in it.
Sir, thank you so very much for coming to Wyandotte County, for having interest in our community, for being here with us today, for giving us these answers to these questions. I think we're so like so many communities, as you stated at the very front end of your time with us, so many communities are challenged, and appreciate your forthright answers with us. And I believe that will close our time with you here for this portion of your experience in Wyandotte County. And I believe that this evening you will be interacting with members of our community, and we may be able to interact with you again then. So, Mr. Kelly, are you escorting Mr. Curp? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Cotton.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Perhaps you'd like to invite the community to the public meet and greet this evening at 6:30.
Thank you. So at 6:30 this evening here at City Hall, we have the public meet and greet. 6:30 to, I think, probably 8:30. It's going to take a little while for folks to rotate through to meet the candidates that are the finalists. There had been a link, if you will, online with which to register for that. And I believe we had a very strong sign up number. If you might possibly know that, I feel like it's 100 plus.
I think you're exactly right, and you do not need to pre-register
Okay.
to come tonight.
Thank you. So you don't have to pre-register. If you're a member of the community, you're welcome. I think when you do come in downstairs, they're actually going to instruct you on where to go after that, if I'm not mistaken. Okay. Thank you, sir. at 2. We're just going to keep to our original time frame.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Okay, we will come back together. And we have our next candidate here with us to spend some time with us and answer our questions that we prepared. And I want to introduce Elke Doom. I want to make sure, is that correct?
Yes.
Pronunciation?
Yes, it is.
Thank you very much. My name's Melissa Bynum. I serve as at-large District 1 Commissioner for our unified government. The role that I'm in at the moment is Mayor Pro Tem to lead the commission through a series of questions that we have prepared. So we want to say welcome to you. We are extremely pleased to be able to have you here and have this time to spend with you. We have compiled some questions. We're going to suggest to you that your time frame per question is 3 or 4 minutes.
Okay.
We actually have our clerk, Monica Sparks, wave Monica. She actually has a little timer. We're not going to cut you off. We're just going to help you keep track of the time that you're spending answering the questions. Make sure that we get through all of them in the time that we have with you. So, by way of introduction, I will have the commissioners all go around and introduce themselves and tell you the commission district they represent, in the hopes that you have familiarized yourself somewhat with the geography of our county and where our commission districts are. So we'll start at the end. Commissioner Kane.
Commissioner Mike Kane, 5th District. Good afternoon, Ms. Doom. Gail Townsend, Commissioner in District 1, northeastern part of the city.
Harold Johnston, District 4, neighboring her district in the city.
Chuck Stites, District 7, Western Wyandotte County.
Andrew Davis, District 8, Midtown, North Central, Kansas City, Kansas.
Angela Markley, District 6, which is almost all of Turner and about half of Argentine.
And I am Melissa Bynum, at-large District 1. I take the northern half of the county.
Tom Burrows, at-large District 2. I have the southern part of Wyandotte County.
I'm Brian McKiernan. I represent District 2, so downtown and the neighborhoods west and south.
Thank you. And we do have one commissioner not able to be with us this afternoon. His job didn't allow him to be away at this time. So, and that is Commissioner Christian Ramirez. So we're going to jump into our question session here. And the first question that we will dive into is, what experience have you had, if any, in overseeing a budget that contained a structural deficit? 2 follow-ups that I'll go ahead and give you now are, what actions were taken under your direction to overcome the deficit? And secondarily, were your efforts successful in minimizing or eliminating that budget deficit? So.
Yes. Yes, about 2009, we had an economic crash. I'm sure you had it also. Well, it was pretty severe in Michigan. It was so negative to that state that we actually lost more people leaving the state than any other state in the country, because they lost their jobs and they lost their homes. So I had a budget that we had gotten word from the state that our revenue sharing was going to be decreased, but we still had to provide our services. So we took a look at what our current budget was, what we had, in our, well, I just got to nickname it our rainy day savings. We estimated that we were going to have a 16% reduction in our budget. And that was just based on what we were getting from the state of Michigan. In Michigan, our taxes come from property values. When your property values have decreased to about 50% of their prior value, you're going to have a huge economic hit. So in talking with all of my fellow leaders in the area, talking about how they were going to balance their budget, each one of them told me they'd continue to lay off people until their budget was balanced. And I asked them, well, how do you keep your operations going and how do you keep your services going? And they really didn't have an answer. And I said, well, I think we can do a little bit better than that. So we took a look at every expenditure we had. We had discussions with people who were of retirement age. We did not push anyone out, but we certainly had them sit down with their, what we call MERS, for their potential retirement, what that would look like to them compared to what they were going to continue working those next few years. Some of them decided to retire, which was a help to the budget. Again, no pressure. I don't pressure anyone to leave or retire. We also restructured the entry-level salaries of people coming in, the step-ups, and we also work closely with the unions to identify our clerical staff, which until that time there was a clerk of the building and a clerk of, assessing, and they all had their specific titles. What they agreed to do is allow us to use that title clerk so that we could cross-train amongst other departments. One of the biggest savings was we had a very rich, almost a Cadillac type plan of healthcare. And people are very concerned about their healthcare if you reduce that, it causes a lot of anxiety. So knowing that that was an area that we might be able to save some money, we had a number of companies come in and provide us with optional plans. And rather than myself and the board picking it and said, here's your plan, we went to the union stewards, we went to the representatives who then went to the employees and said, here are the potential options that we have. What works best for your staff? And so we let the staff analyze all of it. And we went from a very rich Blue Cross Blue Shield to a PPO, which gave them the same type of, services, same out of pocket costs, but it saved us quite a bit. It put us in a good position. And then we did one thing that was, there were some raised eyebrows about it, but when you work in a community that's been around for a while, you have one department that has a program that they bought 20 years ago that's no longer really being serviced. And you have another program and they don't talk to each other. There's no real interaction. And the potential for error is there when you have to download, carry it to another department, upload. So we made an investment into a program. It's a Michigan program, but there are many other programs around the country that are very, very similar, where you buy a package, you purchase the modules that you need for the various departments. They all run on the same platform. It's easy to train your clerical staff. If they know how to work in one department, the platform is very similar, and they're able to use this and train very quickly. And also, when you need to transfer data, you aren't going to have the hiccups if you're using different
4 minutes
older
has
programs. Some of them no longer had service to them. When they broke down, it was it. So utilizing all of that together, the savings, we managed to keep our budget in line. We were the only community in the entire area, I would say the entire county, that did not lay off a single employee. And when we got over the hump, when things started to improve a little bit, by 2010, 11, we were the first to be able to hire again. So I consider that a real success story for our community.
Thank you very much. Considering your past work experiences with municipalities in the topic areas of economic development, what failures, if any, have you had in trying to improve areas that were economic examples of that?
I do on an economically depressed area. I came into a city that the downtown was built in the early 1900s. And they had a secondary, the equivalent of the new downtown, where you have the restaurants and the fast foods and whatnot. But the old downtown had languished, and it was more empty than it was, full. A lot of out-of-state landlords, owners, they really didn't care what their businesses looked like. But the ones who were there really wanted to make a difference. So with a very, very limited budget, I reached out to all of our partners, and that when I say our partners, I'm talking about the Chamber and the Rotary. And I met with the pastors of the local churches, and I met with the seniors, and I said, together we can turn this downtown around. Just, trust me on this. We can do this. A lot of people, we heard so many negative comments about you can't put lipstick on a pig. Why are you even trying? But little by little, through our efforts of meeting with business owners, developing a facade improvement program where we contributed a certain amount. If they would also contribute, we saw owners start to take, the ones who owned it, they took more pride. They took advantage of that program and started replacing signs and replacing windows and painting their buildings and freshening it up. Well, when that came, people started to take another look at this downtown, that rents were cheap because no one wanted to be there, but creative people need inexpensive places to live. We also were, and I say we, and I'd like to say me, but I'm the catalyst. But when I say we, my outreach with our departments and with our community was so widespread. We actually had artists and college students coming down washing windows. We had artists painting murals on the side of buildings, and I'm talking professional painting that they did at cost for us because they cared that much. We also then instituted more festivals to bring people downtown. So little by little, the momentum really swelled. And by the time, and that was in West Virginia, by the time I left West Virginia, we'd had the purchase of the old theater that was under renovation. We had a purchase of the old diner that, you know, everyone had loved, that had closed 20 years before. That's now back in business. I was able to recruit a community college to come in the downtown, which really energized it because you've got students of all ages coming in. And I just recently went down there for a visit, and it was so heartening to see all of the momentum and how it's carried forward today, to see the coffee shops and the music venues and, you know, the outdoor seating, and it just the energy and life that's been brought into an area that so many people gave up on. And, you know, it was really nice to hear from people, you know, we started this together. We started the catalyst for this, and we made it happen. And I moved down there. I moved right down in the heart of it. And I was seen walking every day and talking to residents, talking to business owners. And they used to joke, look at her, she's even picking up trash. And I said, well, we want our downtown clean. We all have to make an effort. So just doing all of that, getting things clean. Oh, and one of the first things I insisted upon was when the people were complaining, oh, it's tired, it's, you know, run down, overgrown, it's dirty. First thing I said is, let's take a look at what we, the city, own. And we need to clean up what we own to set an example for the rest of the community. So that's the first thing we did. We cleaned up everything we owned. We power washed, we organized, we pulled weeds, we've bought new benches. Everything to have people realize that we are going to make a difference, and we want you to join us. So a real success story on
4 minutes has expired.
redevelopment.
Thank you. So just staying on that theme for just a moment. In that context, if you were confronted with a similar situation here, is there any part of that experience that you might do differently?
No,
Okay.
it was that positive,
Good.
and there was such an outreach. And to me, it was an absolute joy when I had people who were in their 80s coming down to help us with festivals saying, I want to make a difference. I remember when this is where my first date was. This is where my first dinner was with my husband. So, I mean, talk about community outreach. It was really wonderful. It was something special to see how people really cared and remembered the past and wanted to do everything they could to make it beautiful again.
Thank you. We'll turn to a little different topic here. Within our organization over the last year or so, our staff have experienced a good deal of upheaval. We've had significant turnover of department heads and lower level employees. Can you talk to us about how you would ensure that employees here feel supported and valued, possibly given that they might have additional tasks to do without additional pay due to open positions here within the organization?
The first thing I do is get to know the employees. I get to know them by name. I know I can't know everyone, but at least I visually recognize people. We have the same thing everywhere. We have a shortage of employees. We have openings. What I've done, and I've done my absolute best to hire good people, first of all, and then retain them by giving them the support they need, giving them the acknowledgement that, you know, if they're doing a good job, they know about it. I tell them they're doing a great job. I also take a look at, what's available for succession planning. I mean, people who want to move up the ladder, they like to know that there's an opportunity for them down the road. And if that's a possibility, then we look at the training that's available. We look at schooling that's available. Most recently, well, not most recently, but recently I was in the city of East Point and that's in Michigan. We had a lot of our people retiring. And knowing that they were leaving in 3 to 5 years, we needed to get moving. Otherwise, we were going to be struggling. And so we identified those who really we thought had talent. We thought had the drive and the energy. And then we assisted them with the training that they needed, with the education they needed. We had one young lady in the finance department who, was interested in taking over for the finance director when he retired. And we sent her back to college to finish her bachelor's degree because that was a requirement of the position. So we try and work with everyone to, first of all, support people in their positions, look for opportunities for them if there are some, help them in any way we can, and just, really recognize that we appreciate them. We appreciate what they do. And they're welcome to complain too, because we do get them coming in the office and, they feel frustrated and they feel a little overwhelmed sometimes and they're trying to feel like they're doing a little bit too much. And, acknowledging that and recognizing that, yeah, that's valid. You do feel overwhelmed and I want you to do the best you can. And I appreciate what you're doing. It goes a long way.
Thank you. As you researched this particular job opportunity, can you talk with us about what struck you as perhaps one or two of the biggest challenges you see facing our unified government? And also what struck you about one or two opportunities facing our unified government?
Mm-hmm. Well, the biggest challenge is trying to accomplish everything you'd like to accomplish. I took a look at your budget. I took a look at your goals and what you'd like to see happen, where you'd like to see your money allocated. And as in all governments, we have more wish lists than we do money. And that's true for everyone. We don't have unlimited funds. So taking a look at, the potential for budgetary issues, I'm aware of that. That's something that we could work through together. What really I really loved reading about the potential for expanding the historical district, having worked in a historical area and, the credits and seeing how beautiful some of the old buildings are. That really resonated with me. I also really like to see that, you were looking at everything from all angles, from the, opportunities for the youth, for the recreation, to keep up safety, to keep up cleanliness, to keep up the communication that you want to have. Just kind of reading all of the goals that you have for the unified government resonated with me. And I felt that with the background and experience I have, that would be a really good fit.
A little bit similar.
Mhm.
Considering your past work experiences, again, in other municipalities, in topic areas of economic development, what, if any, successes have you had with improving areas in a municipality that were economically challenged or depressed, if you will, before your intervention? I know you just told the story of your downtown, but perhaps you could share another success story.
We have, I was working as an interim township manager for a town called Royal Oak Township. And the entire township was economically disadvantaged. I mean, they had been for a number of years. They started out as a full 36 square mile township. And through the many years, they were nibbled on down to a very, very small 5 square mile area. So all the other neighboring communities, just took away their land from them, annexed it out, and left the community with very little opportunity to really raise taxes, to have commercial businesses. So the burden was on the residents. And a lot of the residents there are lower income. So they really struggle. So what we did this past year was take a look at all of the potential opportunities we might have. And one of the things that the community has done is through the years, through tax sales, acquired a number of parcels, vacant parcels in the community. And they were just sitting there. And so we talked about how we could get those developed, not only to bring tax dollars in the community, but also to enhance the neighborhood. So there are two organizations. One is a nonprofit, one is a for-profit that we've been talking to about coming in to build the homes for the infill. Either the township selling those lots for a very low price, or really almost for, for $1 to bring that development in so that housing could be built that is affordable to the community. Any builder can come in and build you a $300,000-$400,000 infill house. If it can't meet the needs of the community, it's really not helping. So right now, I've just actually met with the township supervisor yesterday. We talked about the opportunity to bring in housing that is affordable to their residents. So much of their housing is old. It's old stock, 1920s, 30s, and 40s. And so a lot of it hasn't had the maintenance because of the sheer cost of the maintenance. So we were looking at that. We also had been talking with a local hospital. It's very big in the Detroit area. It's Henry Ford, the automobile guy. Henry Ford has the hospitals, and they had an older hospital that they were vacating to move into one of their new fully equipped ones. And so we had already done an outreach to talk about what would it take for us to have that building for a township hall, senior center, community, everything. Put it all in there, our recreation center. For a hospital, it was very small. As far as hospitals go, it was built in the 1960s. And as far as we haven't gotten too far, but it appears that they may be willing to donate that building to the township so the township can move out of the building they're in and utilize a building that will really serve the needs of the community. There's also a combination of looking at an area that would be mixed use housing, commercial area in the front, mixed use in the back. It's a nice swath of land that the township owns. So there's some real opportunities there that have come from, things that haven't gone right in the past, but it's given the township some opportunities to acquire land through the years. And now they're poised to make a difference and start to rebuild their township a bit.
Thank you. Tell us about your experience negotiating labor contracts with public employees, and secondarily, are you willing and able to provide perhaps a contact name of a labor leader that you had a successful negotiation with, and perhaps leave that with our clerk or our chief legal counsel?
Absolutely. Yes, I've negotiated a number of contracts throughout the years with many unions. And when I say many, Michigan is a union state. Detroit's a union town. And so our police have their own union, our fire has their union, clerical has their union. And so I've worked with a number of different unions. Even the United Auto Workers is trying to break into municipal government, trying to recruit people into having them represent them. So yes, I have negotiated a number of successful contracts, something that I've been doing for a number of years. And we always come to a compromise eventually, not right away, but eventually we do come to a compromise that works for all of us. So yes, I'd be happy to share that with you.
Thank you very much. This is the last formal question. And then after that, since we have time, I would like to offer you, after this last question, I would like to offer you the opportunity to, spend 5 or so minutes talking with us about yourself, anything beyond the questions that we've asked that you might want to make sure that we know about you before we depart our time together. So last question. Can you talk with us about a time when you had conflict in your organization, either among individuals or between departments, and describe for us the strategies that you use to resolve those conflicts and come to a positive outcome?
Right. Well, I think conflict is to be human. There's always some conflict else, whether it's with the employees, whether it's with elected officials. We did have quite a conflict in a community I worked in. And it was a person who was in a position of authority, who oversaw a department, several people in that department. He was very demeaning towards the employees, very dismissive. I thought it was quite insulting, and it resulted in formal complaints against this manager. I did have a talk with him about how, the perception was, how he was talking to his staff, and how it was not conducive to a good working environment, and that it could not continue. And that's all they wanted. The employees wanted it to stop. Well, it didn't stop. If anything, he became more hostile, more obnoxious, and more dismissive and rude of the employees. So, I sat this manager down and said, here are my expectations. I'm going to put these in writing for you so you don't forget them. Everything we talk about will be put in writing. So here are my expectations. You've not met them. We've had this talk. So now we're going to go further, just a further step. And I'm going to give you a plan of improvement and what you are going to have to accomplish to improve your management skills and your attitude and your behavior towards your staff. And so that was clearly outlined. I also required that the employee meet with me every morning at 9 o'clock to discuss the day and what was on the, his agenda and what he was going to accomplish. I also set up a number of training sessions that were required and with a time limit. Management, getting along with people. I wish they had one that called how to play nice in the sandbox. If they had one of those, we could go a lot further, but it's just the inability to understand that you are being disruptive with your words and how you're treating people. So I set out a very strict timeline, the objectives that we needed to meet, the goals we needed to meet. And before we came to the end, that employee wisely decided that it would be in his best interest to find another field of work. And so he left.
Thank you. Those are the end of our formal questions. Again, I don't know if I explained at the front end, but the questions were developed by the commissioners, provided by the commissioners, and then they were ranked.
Mhm.
In other words, we had more than the questions that we're asking you, and then we ranked our top 10. And so that's how we arrived at the questions that we're asking you today. So we do have time, and I'd like to offer you the opportunity to just spend 5 minutes, if you will, talking with us about you and like I said, anything about you that you'd like to share and things that you want to make sure that we know that might be a part of a question we didn't ask you today.
All right. Well, I'll share a few things with you that are not on the resume, but has brought me to this point in my career. I lived in a neighborhood that my neighbors did a lot of complaining about the city doesn't do this for us and the city doesn't do that for us. And I said, well, if you don't like it, why don't you go to the city and volunteer your time to make your city better? And I got a lot of puzzled looks from that one, but I started out being a volunteer and working on community projects, working in the park, helping in a lot of different ways, renovating buildings for the Historical Society. We renovated a little red schoolhouse that was brought into our park, and a church was moved over to the park as a historical park that was being either created or recreated if we didn't have the existing buildings. And that's how I got to know that my council members in my community were just regular people, and I got to know them well. And from there, they offered me a temporary position working. It was a temporarily funded position working for the city in the clerk's office during an election season. And I enjoyed very much working for the community and attending the council meetings. And, somewhere it really resonated with me that we really can make a difference on a more local level. We think of government often as the president and our senators and governors, but we don't think often about what we can do on a more local level, how we can change the lives of people, how we can make things good. And that I learned that by getting to know my, council members and my mayor and, attending meetings and learning all the projects that they had to make some decisions on. As we all know, there's not endless money. And from there, I sat with our assessor and I would question her about what it is she did. And, she recognized I was interested and directed me towards classes. And I became a licensed residential, commercial, and industrial appraiser for municipal government for valuation purposes. And I worked in that field as, doing different types of appraisal work. And eventually I became the department head and I managed the department for communities. I did work independently for a while. I had my own business where I contracted with communities. I also saw a real need in the community I was living in for an elected official, and I stepped up to the plate and I ran for township supervisor. And I served as our township supervisor for a 4-year term. And then, since then I've been managing community since. So it was a transition throughout my career, and I made it my career. I so enjoyed working in municipal government that I decided that was going to be my career goal because I saw what wonderful things we can accomplish on behalf of our citizens. So I've been managing communities for quite some time now. I've had budgets as low as $2 million, which is in the little township that I was serving as an interim, and also multi-million dollar budgets up in Alaska, and with major economic development and projects that ran into $83 million and many other $1 million. So, I've had the benefit of working in small communities. I've had the benefit of working in larger communities. Some of them have been financially strapped. One was flush with money, which is really unusual, but they were. And I would remind them that this is not how the world works, that we don't all have unlimited funds, but they had become so accustomed to money from the oil fields up in Alaska. And they had forgotten the days that they ran lean themselves. So I think it's all in all, it's been a wonderful experience for me. And I've had so many opportunities and I've had so many mentors also. And I'm very strong on mentoring others. I believe that is part of what I should be doing at this point in my career, is to identify talent, to mentor, to bring people, bring them up. We need them. We need them to be able to take over and, in the future. We don't want to be one of those 400,000 empty, unfilled positions throughout the United States that they're struggling to get filled. So I work very hard at retention, mentoring, succession planning. That's very, very important to me. So I've been very fortunate. As if you've had an opportunity to look at my resume, you'll see that the efforts that I've made throughout the years have culminated in being awarded a number of scholarships and fellowships. So I've been awarded fellowships through the state of Michigan, through the state of West Virginia. I was also awarded one to Harvard for, their executive 5 minutes executives. And yeah, it's been good, and it's been a progression throughout my career. So I'm happy to be here now with the county.
Thank you so much for that and for your time here with us. We're so pleased you've been able to come and join us and spend this time with us and answer these questions. And those are all the questions that we have. And I believe Mr. John Kelly is going to escort you now to the next room that we're going to take you to. And again, thank you so much. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem, would you care to remind individuals about tonight?
I'm sorry, what?
For someone who's maybe just tuning in, maybe remind them about tonight, the meet and greet.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much. So anyone who is just now joining us, we have a meet and greet tonight here at City Hall at 6:30, beginning at 6:30 p.m. and probably going a couple of hours, where you will be joined by these county administrator finalists and get to interact with them and hear from them maybe in a more personal way than this. And so everyone is welcome here at City Hall tonight, beginning at 6:30. Thanks. And we will hear from our next candidate at 3 p.m. So we have 20 minutes. We just decided to keep to the original schedule. Thank you.
By pushing it.
Monica, are you ready? Okay. Okay. Welcome back. Thank you very much for staying with us here, and we are back with our candidate, Mr. David Johnston. And I want to welcome everyone that's watching online as well as in person. And Mr. Johnston, welcome to you. We are very pleased to have you here and be able to spend this time with you. We've compiled questions that the commissioners have submitted and then ranked. And so we took our top 10 after the commissioners submitted questions and then put them through a ranking process. So we are guesstimating that you'll have 3 to 4 minutes per question. We have Monica Sparks, our clerk here. She's got a timer. It is not to cut you off in any way from an answer, just to help keep you mindful of what time it is. So certainly if she were to gently say that 4 minutes is up, it doesn't mean you have to stop talking. It just means we're all staying aware of the time that we're spending together. I'm going to have our commissioners go around and introduce ourselves in the hopes that you have some familiarity with the geography of our county and the districts where we each serve. So we'll start down at the end.
Good afternoon, Mr. Johnson. I'm Gail Townsend, representing District 1, the most northeastern part of the city.
Harold Johnston, District 4. I buttress up against Commissioner Townsend's, and mine is in the center of the north center of the downtown area.
Chuck Stites, District 7. I am West Central Wyandotte County.
Andrew Davis, District 8. It is North Central Kansas City, Kansas.
Angela Markley, District 6. That's almost all of Turner and about half of Argentine.
I am Melissa Bynum, at-large District 1. I cover the northern half of Wyandotte County.
Tom Burrows, District at Large, District 2, have the southern part of Wyandotte County.
Okay.
I am Brian McKiernan. I cover District 2, which is downtown and the neighborhoods west and south.
So before we start, a point of clarification.
Yes, sir.
Your top 10 questions, are they in the form of Dave Letterman format?
They are. They absolutely are.
I just want to know what I'm getting myself.
You nailed it. We do have one commissioner, Commissioner Christian Ramirez, who was not able to join us today. He represents District 3, which is a lot of Argentine and all of the Rosedale area, which is the southern easternmost area of the community. So
Okay.
just wanted to make sure that we at least introduced his name and district to you. And so with that, we will get underway with our questions. And the first question is going to have kind of two little sub questions that go along with it. So we'll jump right in. What experience have you had, if any, in overseeing a budget that contained a structural deficit? And then based on that, what actions were taken under your direction to overcome that? And were those actions successful in minimizing or eliminating that deficit? So kind of a three-part question there for you, and I can repeat any part of it that you need, but with that, we'll hand that to you.
Yes, I did notice that in my research and in that there is a structural deficit issue that is facing Wyandotte County, particularly the city portion of the budget. I have faced deficit budgets a couple times in my career. Those actually happened when there were forces beyond our control that affected our city governments. The first time was the Great Recession at the end of the first decade, when I served as the city manager of Maple Valley, Washington. Our largest revenue stream, driven by the Washington Municipal Tax Code, was sales tax revenue. And when you were in a recession and people were being laid off, or they were afraid of their security, they don't spend their money. And therefore, we saw a significant decrease in our sales tax revenue that was putting our budget in a deficit situation. What we did out there was the first time we dusted off a priority-based budgeting process, where we monetized all the services that each department provided. And we kind of separated them into three categories. You have the low-hanging fruit, the things that you can pick that won't really dramatically affect the levels of services that you provide. Then there is the second one that are those that are driven by mandatory action, whether state law requires your government to provide services. You have contracts that have terms that cannot be renegotiated, so you're kind of locked into that. So those tend to be the ones that tend to be viewed as fixed costs. And then the third category is the rest of the budget, which you find out is by and large discretionary. It's things that the council wants to do over time, not necessarily legally mandated, but they saw a need and they created programs or capital purchases. In that process, we did call out a significant amount of expenses that we could defer. And one of the things that we did not want to do is to cut the essential basic services we provided. And we also wanted to be viewed as a fair and just employer. And therefore we did our darndest not to engage in layoffs. And what we did do is what most organizations do, we froze vacancies. So we went through that process, monetized, cut some things that we could do, not fill vacancies. And that got us through that 2-year deficit time of the Great Recession. The second one was with Covington. We have a municipal tax code there that gives local governments a payroll tax option, which we have embraced. And it's where the employee works. That's where it's driven. Well, when the pandemic hit, people then brought in the new model of work where they can work from home, and they did not necessarily work in the city of Covington. At the end of the first year, we found ourselves having to refund $1.6 million out of our general fund, which was an unexpected hit. At the same time, we had a large employer that went through a reassessment with the assessor of the county, and we lost about another $800,000 of property tax revenue from that entity. So you get this $2.5 million swing that we relied on. And so again, we dusted off the process that I used in Maple Valley, did the 3 categories of services that we provided, and got through that process. Now, that process opened up the door for us to do performance metrics as well. And we had a staff member whose title was Manager of Data Analytics, and was able to help make the process a little bit more sophisticated by working with each department head in going through the inventory of services and create performance metrics, either based on national standards or best management practices. And we were able to look at efficiencies in our processes that saved money, cut time, et cetera, et cetera. And we weathered that storm as well. And then, of course, probably like this public entity, was grateful for CARES funding and grateful for ARPA money that allowed us to recoup some lost revenue. The Maple Valley one, and I'll finish this, also forced us to take a look at our economic development efforts, since sales tax revenue was our major revenue stream above a frozen tax levy, property tax levy. We had to get into a tax-based diversification effort that led us to promote commercial development that then served as a catalyst for sales tax generating businesses, new ones to our community, that then gave us a more longer-term sustainable effort.
Thank you, sir. So in listening to this next question, just keep in mind as I ask it that there will be a similar one along down a little further, okay? Considering your past work experiences with other municipalities, especially in the topic areas of economic development, are there failures that you've had in trying to improve areas in any municipality where you've been that were economically challenged or depressed? If you would care to explain anything about a failure you may have experienced in that effort.
One, when I worked with Rantoul, Illinois, we were, I was really involved in the redevelopment, revisioning of a closed Air Force base that was located there. And we were doing very well with the revisioning of it and creating a new master plan for the redevelopment of that area. At the same time, we had a small downtown that served as the core of the community, like most downtowns do, that was struggling. And when you went through that downtown, you saw properties that had existing businesses, but really did not have an attractiveness that would either bring community pride to the residents or an eye for an outsider saying, this is a very nice downtown. I think I'll stop and take a look around. And so we started the process of trying to get the businesses through our Chamber of Commerce efforts to kind of organize and get a fresh look for them. And the way the village said, we'll bring an outsider in to help us into that process. But this, by and large, we don't have funds to provide rehab at that community. We're gonna help you create your vision. We can help lobby to get outside help from other levels of government, but you got to create your own vision and then we'll work with you to sell it. Where the failure came is, I think, unfortunately, the message on the front end was misunderstood by the local business community of the downtown. They thought the city was going to do all this work.
Bless you.
And unfortunately, it got to the point where there was no meaningful work being done, meeting after meeting, that business owners were being frustrated. And the city, we at the city were like, we empowered you to do your work. Why aren't you doing it? And then when you had these types of discussions, it created a rift. And that was probably one of my largest failures in an economic redevelopment effort, is that small area. We drifted in two different directions and we didn't catch it in time. And it created a rift that needed to have more attention paid to it than we probably should have.
Thank you. So given that, would you do anything different if you had a similar situation or experience here in this community?
Well, I think one of the things that I have found about Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas, is that there is a strong community spirit that's been developed over many, many years, that there is an expectation that we work together to solve common issues. So now, what I would do differently is to make sure that we have more feedback communication with the participants of a process. So we are forcing ourselves, both sides of the table, to understand where we are both at the same time, and get us back on the same page so we can continue the strive, move forward, instead of a delegation to an outside group without monitoring, which I think was a weakness in the Rand Tools story.
And we'll turn to a little different topic here with the next question. Over the last year or so, our staff have had a lot of upheaval with turnover of department heads and also turnover of lower level employees. How could you ensure our employees feel supported and valued, and especially the fact that they might be given additional tasks without additional pay just because we have, a number of open positions?
Well, in any relationship that I try to be involved with, the first step I take is making sure that all parties understand their roles. So we work on role clarification. And when you're talking about with staff, again, you have the one instrument that every position should have, and that's a current job description. In the job description should have performance expectations. And there's always that last line, other duties as assigned. Let's try to define what that means. When you need to have flexibility, when you have smaller staff, but you need to ask them to do more, that's where that comes in. And in all fairness, it means you should have good communication with your employee relations efforts. Instead of waiting until the time comes where you have to ask to add on, involve them in the process so the employees can be part of the discussion of the challenges that each group is facing to meet the service levels, expectations of our elected officials and our citizens. If we don't involve them in the day-to-day understanding of the business that we're in, then I can see where you can have consternation when people feel they're being dumped on without the proper context of the work that the department has and their contribution to it. So I usually advocate more than just one employee appraisal a year. That's usually when you review their performance. What I try to do with my direct reports is to have at least 4 employee evaluation discussions. In those discussions, we talk about how they contribute to the success of our area. And when I need them to step up to something else, I take the time to explain why and why it's important and why I chose them to accept these additional responsibilities. On the other side of the coin for that, we also want to show our employees that we truly value them and want them to succeed in their job. And therefore, in those types of discussions, I encourage, I do with my direct reports, and I encourage the department heads to have these conversations with their supervisors and then them with their employees is what tools do they need to succeed to do their job against the expectations that we have of them? Are there additional training that we need to offer our employees or certain employees? Well, we need to make sure that we can have them ready to do the best job they possibly have. And some of that means we have to do training. Some of it is tools, equipment. If we don't have conversations with our employees, we may not know what's missing for them to do a better job with equipment. And then we can talk about how do we fill that void that we're hearing directly from them. So good communication, more regular communication with contextual discussions, usually I have found helps create a better, more empowered, loyal environment. And when we ask employees to step up because they feel respected and valued in the workplace, they usually do. They're also going to ask a question that management has to be able to answer. How long are we going to be in this situation?
4 minutes has expired.
And so we need to be prepared to talk about that question as well. So honesty and openness with our staff is important.
Thank you very much. So as you did your research for this job, what struck you as 1 or 2 biggest challenges facing our unified government, and then possibly 1 or 2 of our biggest opportunities that are available to us here at the unified government? Challenges and opportunities.
Well, we'll start with the challenges. I think this idea of a structural deficit in your budget needs to be addressed. And why is that going to be a huge challenge? It's not an issue that developed overnight. And therefore, we're going to have an understanding of how it evolved to where it is today. And from that, we may be having to have some interesting discussions about making some hard choices on programs, services, service levels, et cetera, et cetera. And then how do we work with the public to understand this? So I think that's one challenge. The other one, I know in the budgeting, what I have not found, I'm used to having at least a 5-year budget model. That's part of your budget document. But it also is a tool to talk about future planning, thinking about of entering into a grant application or doing some new program. We can use that as a tool to see what monetary impact that's going to have in our things. So you may say we can afford it in year 1 or 2 with the assumptions that are behind your budget model. You may find that we don't have the resources to do it in year 4. But we don't have that tool. We can't have a more broader, comprehensive discussion on that. So I think developing a longer term financial model. I know that in the recruiting brochure, it mentions that and in your financial department audit that was done, you mentioned that we need to make sure we have GASB supported policies and procedures in place and all that. I also think we need to look at good tools to help us be better decision makers. And I think multi-year budgeting or multi-year budget model can help provide good discussion and lead to better, more sustainable decisions. So those are the two that I see that are challenges. Now, opportunities. I was glad to see that you have adopted a new land use plan. I probably would ask it to be expanded a little bit, that we do what's called a true comprehensive plan, which has a few more chapters that talk about the community as a whole, and help us have community discussions that will then lead to putting together our plans of action of how we're going to deliver what we say we're going to deliver. So you have a good master plan in place. I probably would advocate a little expansion to that in different areas. But not every community has, if they had one, it still may be 20, 25 years old, while yours is current. And so you have a good foundation in those assessments that were mentioned in the recruiting brochure will help the city manager out to have be ahead of the game when I start the position, and can have good, fruitful discussions with you as a body, with my management team and the staff. So that's a positive. I also think that there's a desire, when I read that a priority of this position is to work with the
4 minutes has
Development
expired.
Council on creating a economic development strategy for this jurisdiction. That should be fundamental. The fact that you recognize it and you have a history of creating the right partnerships. I think you have in place good industry, good community leadership that wants this community to succeed, the business leaderships to succeed, wants this place to succeed. And the fact that you're in a very heart of the vibrant Kansas City metropolitan area, you're poised for success. Just got to have some direction. And I look at that as a positive opportunity.
Thank you very much. Considering your past work experiences in topic areas of economic development, this is kind of that follow-up question I was telling you about earlier. So within the areas of economic development, what successes have you had with improving areas that may have been economically challenged or depressed?
Well, I'll start with Rantoul very quickly. It will be 10 years before I got there. The federal government closed Air Force Base that was there for 80 plus years. It was the community's identity. It was the community's economic engine. And when that closed, the workforce left. And the jobs left. And 10 years of inaction really was grounding this community and moving nowhere. When I got there, I took that position because I saw the opportunity that 1,000-acre plus former air base with a continuing working general aviation airport as its hub had for the future of that community. And it also provided me excellent opportunity to fence with the federal government on behalf of my client called the Village of Rantoul. Usually the 2-ton gorilla federal government wants to tell you what to do, but here we are saying, no, this is what we want to do, and this is what you need to do, like environmental cleanup, small things like that. So that really got the community excited that we can be a player, as opposed to being dependent on the federal government for years as an employer, and all that. Yeah, you could be a player. And so we master planned that property. We got a redevelopment commission passed by the state legislature. It guided that process. They recommended we look to the other side of the town where we had an interchange with an interstate and create a TIF district and create mixed use development. That would open up commercial developments and residential development at the gateway of the city. A great new message for people who pass by. And so we created that. And those types of things bolster the confidence of a community and give them hope. And I think that's what we did in Rantoul. In Maple Valley, we had this tax-based diversification need. And again, the city has never been an active participant in driving economic development. And that's not my training. My training is I'm a city manager. Economic development helps our community, therefore it's a local government issue. And when I looked at that financial situation that we were facing, I talked about earlier, we needed to create a catalytic development to help create new confidence in the community, but at the same time, be inviting for future commercial development. What I had to do there is develop an economic profile of the community, retail leakage, business demand studies, et cetera, done by a third party consultant. We developed an economic profile of the city. We identified a piece of property, key piece of property we wanted to be the start of this catalytic effort. Had to convince the owner of that property that their participation is important for the future of the community. Would you like us to bring you a buyer? And therefore, he said, yes, you're not going to be involved in negotiating a price. No, we're not going to be involved in price, but we want to create a good working relationship. So we looked for commercial developers that actually wanted to work in the Maple Valley market. We found one. The owner and the
4 minutes has
hit it off,
expired.
and a good relationship happened. He said we could deliver about 80%. He could deliver about 80% of our profile. I said, well, we can compromise on the old 20, but other 20%. But where we're going to require of you is that we jointly market that project together. So we went to regional economic development shows where deals are made, the International Council of Shopping Centers and National Association of Industrial and Office Parks. And we marketed together. The commercial developer did the business questions. I did the public sector questions. At 50% build out, that project was 65% leased. At ribbon cutting, he was 90% leased. And he never saw that activity before. And he attributed the fact that there was a strong partnership from the city. While that was going on, 2 other developments came on board. That's the catalytic nature of that. And so we had some new niche businesses that the community wanted and created more vibrancy in our city.
Thank you for that. Just a little slight turn. Next question. Tell us about your experience negotiating labor contracts with our public employees, and secondarily, follow up to that, would you be willing and able to provide to our chief counsel a contact name of a labor leader that you've successfully had negotiations with?
Yeah, I've been involved in 3 of the communities I managed had collective bargaining agreements. In Westfield, we had an agreement with our fire department. It's the only labor contract that we had. In Rantoul, we had the local FOP representing the interests of our police department, and the IBEW, who represented our public works utility employees. And in Covington, we had 3 negotiating units. The FOP for the police department, the local IAFF chapter for firefighters, and then AFSCME represented our public works employees. I was primarily the first chair in all but 2 negotiating rounds I've been a part of. The other 2, I was second chair because we were dealing with some sensitive negotiating issues, and we felt it was better to have a professional negotiator represent as first chair. I can probably find out who the president of the local unions are for Covington. I would not know who the other 2 cities are because of time when I was there. So I would not know who to contact, but I can probably fairly quickly forward the union leaders of the 3 unions in Covington.
Thank you very much. This is the last question. And after this question, since we have time, I want to afford you the opportunity after this question to take 5 or 6 minutes. Tell us a little bit more about yourself. Tell us about anything that you want to make sure we know, even though perhaps we didn't capture it in one of these questions. So last question, and then, like I said, a little bit, more just that you want to share with us, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
So tell us about a time when there might have been conflict in your organization, either between individuals, among departments, among staff, and describe the strategies that you use to help resolve the conflict and create a positive outcome for the organization.
The one that comes to mind is a situation I had in Maple Valley. We, as every community has, when there's a plat that needs approval or a major development needs approval, it starts with getting approval of the concepts and the zoning review to see if it can actually be done. So I was getting complaints from the commercial development community on how long your review process is, Dave. And I brought in the 2 departments that had the responsibility of reviewing applications. One is our community development / planning department, and the other one was the public works department, because they had to approve the infrastructure support plans to make sure that that development is successful. We also had impact fees on how they're going to be calculated and all that. So they had that review process. Well, in talking with both department heads, the planning department head said, well, I'm not giving the plans to the next department to start the review unless we know that this project can be done per zoning and development regs 100%. Why would we waste public works infrastructure review time unless we know the project could be done? And that was his strong professional opinion. The public works director said, it's been my experience that when there is a process with the planning department, the infrastructure needed to support a development is going to be about 80% complete. Whatever is going to be done will be done. 80% will be installed. Any changes that a planning review or zoning review are going to make to modify it might be a 15 to 20% revision on the infrastructure. Why can't I review the thing as is, and then we can say, based on what you got from the zoning review, you need to make these types of changes, but we already got about 80–85% done. So in the private side, you understand time is money. So I brought those 2 together after going through that fact finding, and The planning person refused to make changes. And therefore, it was incumbent for me to make changes. And therefore, I negotiated a resignation from that individual. Found out that the public works director, in his conversations, he had a planning background and he had time capacity, and he was willing to assume both roles. And therefore, we saved salary money when we needed to save money. But that ensured the fact that we were going to have concurrent review and have a better turnaround time. About 6 months after I made those changes, I got a call from a commercial developer saying, "What did you do? I never had a approval from your city this quickly." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, Steve, who was the guy that assumed both roles, had both the infrastructure, public works, and the planning zoning people working together with my staff. And we turned around a revision and it was approved so quickly, my head is still shaking." And
4 minutes
it
has
was
expired.
important to empower those people to do that work with the idea that we're in the public service business. And what can we do to look at our customer and provide the best public service for them? So this might be a little bit unique story that it involved a personnel change, but sometimes you have to do that. Don't think we want to with that as your starting motive, but in the investigation, you do have to do what's best for the organization, what's best for the customer, and what's best for your city's reputation.
Sir, we've never once had a single complaint about the length of our development process. I'm sorry, that's a lie.
Well, if you shave off a month, you'll think you're doing great.
Finally, thank you for answering all of our questions. I really appreciate that. And in our last few minutes together here, maybe 5 minutes, and if you want to just talk to us about you and like I said, things that you might want to make sure that we know that may not have been covered in one of the questions that we've asked you today.
I think I'm going to highlight real quickly about the spirit of my background. When you have my resume, and you see that I started with a small community of 4,500 people, and I gradually assumed managerial responsibility for larger communities. I want to let you know what that did for me professionally. It forced me to get my hands dirty in areas that I never thought I'd have to get involved in. I never thought I'd have to take the lead to replace a 3-stage sewer lagoon with a modern sewer treatment plant. But I had to. And therefore, it was a crash course to not just understanding what the sewer treatment system is, but what it actually entailed. And when I moved to a larger community and we had larger issues, but I started seeing the importance of having a good team around me that allowed me to delegate authority for them to make decisions while I manage the aura of accountability. And as I got to my largest community, which is Covington in Kentucky, I had a wonderful team of 16 direct reports, had good communication, good role clarification. They understood my expectations, and through an open door policy, they always felt comfortable talking to me. But that freed me to work on larger, more strategic issues. So by having a good generalist knowledge of what it takes to provide public services for a city or for a community makes me dangerous, but it also forces me to make sure I have good people around me with that specific arena. So I have a good generalist background. a good appreciation of surrounding me with good qualified people for the areas that we need them in, and understanding also the importance of keeping the elected officials informed, as well as making sure we keep the public informed. So it's been a wonderful 25 years of professional growth and awareness. Do we make mistakes? Yes, we all do. We're human. But by and large, it's working for these communities have been wonderful professional laboratories for me to develop into an effective local government manager. And I would continue that process here. And making sure that we have the right people in place, we have the vision understood by all, and we establish action plans to show not just you, the elected officials, but our public that the work that we've done in the master plan and the comp plan, developing an economic development strategy, we're keeping everybody informed. And that's what I think 25 years in my career have helped me to do, is be an effective local government manager, to serve the electeds, to serve our citizens well. The other thing I want to let you know that's not on the resume is my wife and I are proud CERT graduates, Community Emergency Response Team graduates. When we lived in Maple Valley, it was very active area for that program. And so went through the training and how to transport bodies and all those wonderful things, turn off gas mains, and do neighborhood recognition and all that. And, you know, when you're looking at a community like Kansas City, Kansas, Wyandotte County, flooding's an issue. And so how do we respond when it's going to take a while for your state and federal emergency management folks to respond? You can have a cadre of citizens that can help stabilize neighborhoods and communities. And if you haven't looked at that program locally, I encourage you to do that. Because again, that's an interesting part of citizen engagement. And you'll find out that in a couple times in Maple Valley, our fire department, it was a regional fire department, they did the program, but because citizens became involved in that program, a couple of the younger men and women asked to be considered to be considered for openings with the fire department to be full-time firefighters. And so it turned into a good farming system for our fire department. And so
5 minutes has expired.
So that's an element that's not on the resume.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate the time that you've been able to spend, appreciate your openness and honesty in answering our questions. Mr. Kelly will escort you to where you are going next, but I want to tell the community that we will begin the meet and greet sessions with our county administrator finalists at 6:30 here at City Hall. So we do welcome the community to come join us here tonight. Thank you, commissioners, for being here and for your questions. And I do not believe that we need a formal adjournment. So we will just say thank you. Commissioner Johnston.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Bynum. Just want to let everybody know that the Business and Economic Development Task Force meeting will be starting at 4 o'clock sharp. So if we can all move out the room, so to speak, with our ongoing conversation.
All right, very good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay,
Thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it.
thank you very much.